In this video, we're going to look at several reasons that explain why every human actually has a unique genetic code. Before we get into details, if we do a quick recap, remember that your DNA is broken into 46 separate pieces, which collectively are what we call your chromosomes, except we don't use the number 46. We actually use the number 23 times 2, because 23 of these chromosomes come from your mother, which are why we call these the maternal chromosomes. And if we go all the way back to when you started to exist, we can trace these 23 maternal chromosomes back to the egg that eventually made you who you are. Now, the 23 chromosomes that come from your father, which are what we call your paternal chromosomes, obviously didn't come from an egg because biological males produce sperm instead, and after sexual intercourse, the sperm and the egg combine with each other in order to make the very first cell at which your life truly begins, at the moment of conception. So this cell here, for the first time, doesn't just have a single set of 23 chromosomes, it actually has two sets from both of your parents, which is what we call a zygote cell. And again, this is literally the first cell that eventually divides and makes you who you are. And this moment where your father's sperm and your mother's egg unite in order to create a zygote is what we call the moment of fertilization, which once again is truly the beginning of your life. Now, from this basic understanding, we can reach one relatively simple conclusion. Your cells have 23 times 2 chromosomes, two sets of 23 chromosomes, each of which coming from your mother and your father. Now, if we ask the question, does that mean that it's possible for your mother to give you 100% of your DNA? Well, this must be false, because your mother can only pick one set of chromosomes, one set of the two that she has, in order to give to you. This is also true with your father. He can only pick one set instead of two of his chromosomes in order to contribute to make you who you are. This means that it is biologically impossible for you to look exactly like either of your parents. And unless you're a clone, where you are a genetic duplicate of either of your parents, this explains why no human looks exactly like their mother or exactly like your father, because your mother and father literally pick and choose half of their DNA to combine with the other half chosen by the other parent in order to make you who you are. Now, this concept here is the first example of something that we call genetic recombination. Now, genetic recombination sounds like a relatively complex concept, and it is if we get to the molecular level, but basically all that means is that we're doing mixing of some DNA. So what we want to look at in the rest of the video is we want to explain how does your mother and how does your father choose the 50% of the DNA that they contributed to make you who you are. If we do a little bit of backtracking back to the moment of the fertilization, we need to talk about gametes. So gametes is just the scientific term for sex cells or reproductive cells. And obviously in men, these are sperm that they use to literally swim through the vagina and through the uterus and the rest of the female reproductive system in order to fertilize the egg in the female parent. And once again, at the moment when this happens, the 50% of your father's DNA unites with the 50% of your mother's DNA, and you begin, as we have already discussed before. Now, the interesting thing that many people are not aware of is that every single sperm cell, and there are a lot of sperm cells, the average man releases about 300 million sperm per ejaculation that occurs. And the fact that every single sperm has effectively unique DNA or close to it is quite miraculous. So how exactly does this happen? Well, there's several processes that take place when sperm, and technically eggs as well, are made. So during the process of producing gametes, we can look at what happens to the maternal and paternal chromosomes that control the same information. So here, if we simply designate the blue chromosome as being your paternal chromosome and the red chromosome as being your maternal chromosome, at a point where your bodies produce sperm and eggs, they can actually join together and perform exchanges of some of their DNA. So in this diagram here, we can see an exchange of DNA where the paternal chromosome and the maternal chromosome are actually swapping pieces of DNA here. We call this process DNA, if I can actually spell it properly. We call this process here hybridization, and we call the resulting chromosomes that we make hybrid chromosomes, because we can see that neither of these chromosomes are 100% paternal or 100% maternal, because the paternal chromosome has a piece of DNA here that originated on the maternal chromosome and vice versa on the maternal chromosome here because of this exchange that happened. Now, given that these exchanges, A, don't need to occur in the same location, and B, there doesn't even need to be a single exchange. This might actually happen twice, 3 times, or any number of times. Already, we have an unlimited number of ways that we can alter the DNA that one sperm has compared to the DNA of another. Now, in the next video series, we're going to talk about meiosis, which is the cell division process that produces sperm and eggs. But one of the things that we need to do is we need to take a double set, a set of chromosomes that contains both your paternal chromosomes and your maternal chromosomes, and we need to have that number. So we need to ultimately produce a cell that only has one set of 23 because the zygote receives the other set from the other reproductive cell. Now, what this means, does the same chromosome always have to end up on the cell in the daughter cell on the left that we make? Not necessarily. So here we see that it is the paternal chromosome, because we said the paternal chromosome is blue here. The paternal chromosome here is moving to the left side and is going to become a part eventually of a sperm cell that we make on this side. And therefore the maternal chromosome is migrating over this way and is going to be part of a different sperm cell. But does the paternal chromosome always have to move this way? Obviously not. Effectively, this is completely random. Each of the chromosomes could be positioned in opposite locations and therefore could have migrated and became a different sperm cell. So the reason why this occurs, remember that sperm and egg only contain half of the DNA that the original parent cell has, and which chromosome ends up in which sperm or which egg cell is effectively completely randomized, because this is based on simply how the chromosomes position themselves when the cell is actually divided. What this means is that effectively every sperm cell produced by the father and every egg cell produced by the mother is effectively unique, and identical sperm and egg are almost impossible, if not very, very, very rare. Now, if we go to the fertilization itself, right now it looks like this sperm is going to win. However, is this sperm guaranteed to be the first to the egg? Not necessarily. The sperm might just decide to change direction and miss the egg entirely, and the sperm behind it might end up becoming the ultimate winner and fertilize this egg, producing a zygote. So the act of fertilization itself is yet another example of random chance that effectively guarantees that no two individuals will be the same, given that we know that all sperm and all eggs are unique in terms of their DNA combination, in terms of which chromosomes ended up in which sperm or which egg, and how the chromosomes hybridized and exchanged information with each other. Therefore, each zygote that we produce is going to be based on the unique characteristics of each sperm and of each egg, depending on how the DNA is distributed. And this idea forms the basis of what we call sexual reproduction, and basically guarantees that every fertilization event will produce a human or an offspring in general with different characteristics because they have different DNA than their parents. For this reason, this is why, if we take a look at these images here, every single one of these images here are examples of siblings, meaning that these are biological brothers and sisters that share the same parents, and therefore they technically all are based on the same DNA. However, even in the case of these two, which are twins, we can see that one is male and the other is female, and even though they obviously share some sort of ancestry, the fact that one is male and one is female already tells us that we can get quite a lot of variation. My particular favorite of these, because of how unique each of the siblings are these two here, where we can clearly see that we have one fair-skinned Caucasian parent and one parent of African descent here, and simply because of the randomness of DNA rearrangement that occurs when sperm and egg are produced, you would never be able to tell that these two sisters are actually sisters and related like this. In the next video, the follow-up to this, we're going to talk about yet another source of genetic variation and clarify a few misunderstandings about a word that is often misused, refocusing it instead as being one of the ways to explain why humans have unique profiles of DNA.